Formula One heads to the Hungaroring for the Hungarian Grand Prix this weekend for the 11th round of the season. And we're nearly halfway through the action this year. I'm joined to have a look at this weekend with Alex Kalinauckas and Matt Q. Welcome to the video. This weekend sees the Formula One return of Daniel Ricciardo with AlphaTauri. Only ended up being half a season away from racing in Formula One. Matt, what do we expect from the Aussie this weekend?
Something akin to a thankless task, it seems like, because everyone's talking about how difficult that car is. It's rooted to the bottom of the Constructors' Championship, difficult car to drive. He's coming in at a sort of a circuit that really relies on a good, benign chassis against a really competitive teammate in Yuki Tsunoda who's impressed everyone. So he's race rusty, adjusting to a new team. And he comes as an 8-time Grand Prix winner with the expectation that, he can make a play for the Red Bull seat. He comes in with people expecting him to just, hit the ground running at a track he's won at before. So I think there's a lot of pressure riding on this weekend. Well, a lot of public pressure riding on this weekend, whether personally and internally it's slightly relieved. It should be, I think.
Absolutely. Well, Daniel Ricciardo returns to the Faenza team that he raced with in 2012 and 13. Alex, this is the 8th time that Red Bull as owners have changed drivers halfway through a season. It's kind of common these days that they make the changes when they need to. But can he realistically do anything for his 2024 prospects by driving such a slow car?
Well, it's interesting. I think the more that comes out about this, and there's going to be more in the coming days when the key players involved speak publicly in the press conferences. So Ricciardo himself, particularly Christian Horner at Red Bull, Helmut Marko, you never know what he's going to say at any given moment. When they start talking, there'll be more and more come out about this. But as we find out more, for example, that Christian Horner is now openly saying that actually this is more about 2025 for Ricciardo, not about 2024, which would make sense. But also, if it is about 2025 and Yuki Tsunoda is going to be around again in 2024, again, what's happened to the Red Bull Junior program? You've got Liam Lawson doing extremely well in Super Formula. So if this is all about 2025, there's still a massive bottleneck at the top. And if Lawson, as he seems to be doing, he's very close to the top of the standings in Japan at the moment. If he were to win that Super Formula title this year, he would logically expect an F1 seat, and you would expect Red Bull to give him one. So what's going to happen if Ricciardo's at AlphaTauri for 2024? That said, I think it would have been even harsher to put Liam Lawson in this position, given half a season, no testing whatsoever. It makes sense to the very, very experienced Daniel Ricciardo. But as Matt's already said, the car's really hard to drive, and it's really hard to drive in the key area that Ricciardo needs. It's corner entry. Its rear is unstable, particularly as the speed comes down. The downforce comes off, the car comes up. And it's hard. It's harder to control. It's harder to then get that really fast, smooth exit that Ricciardo wants. And that's what happened at McLaren. That's what the problem he just couldn't tame, other than that one wild, wonderful weekend at Monza a couple of years ago. So, yeah, it does seem a bit of a hiding to nothing. But I think if you dig into the sort of key explanation Marko gave of why they dropped De Vries, he said they didn't see one key lap from him, or one single standout lap for him. So long as Ricciardo at the very least is delivering that, Red Bull will be happy.
And Matt, can I ask you what this means for the main Red Bull team? Now, it's clearly Max Verstappen's team. He can, if you do all the crazy permutations of the maths, he can win the championship so crazy early this year. If he scores a point this weekend, I think he equals the points that Vettel won one of his championships with. Okay, different year, different amount of races, but still, it's a crazy amount of stats you can do with Red Bull this year. Why change anything? Lots of people are saying, well, Daniel Ricciardo at the number 2 team is there to put pressure on Sergio Perez. Sergio Perez doesn't need any more pressure than being inside that pressure cooker, which is Red Bull and Max Verstappen's teammate. What are the permutations for the main team, Matt? Could this just make Perez crumble if it's more pressure? Do you think Perez could raise his game and mean that his 24 seat is not even being questioned anymore?
No, there's no doubt Perez is under pressure. And in fact, since the Ricciardo signing's been made, I think Horner's been a bit more emphatic about sort of the situation Perez is in. But so far, the party line is, or the implied party line is, so long as Perez is in second position in the championship, it doesn't matter. Well, a conversation Alex and I were having, as we ambled out of Silverstone, which our last race together, is that so far that's not been an issue, because Red Bull haven't had, apart from sort of Saudi Arabia, the gearbox issue or whatever, where that rear gunner position has been brutally exposed, where if Verstappen's not in the fight, there's no one to take over and go for victory. And that situation has arguably been relieved even more because Mercedes, Aston Martin, McLaren now, Ferrari, none of them can decide who wants to be second fastest. So there's been a massive toing and froing, which has again relieved the pressure on Red Bull. But when those things sort of coalesce and Verstappen needs a rear gunner, needs defence to get back at a Hamilton-Russell split strategy or something like that. If Perez is not there and he's not second in the championship, that's when those points will really come to the fore. But yes, he is under pressure, and the fact that Horner has now said that there is sort of a route to the Red Bull team, the Ricciardo situation does nothing to relieve that pressure. However, Perez is a very well remunerated Formula One driver. He knew what that gig would entail going up alongside Max Verstappen, and if he in his hearts of hearts believes he can be a world champion and that entails beating Verstappen, well, that comes with surviving in an intensely pressurized situation. So in theory, just adding Ricciardo into the mix should be water off a duck's back, but it is now 5 sort of traditional Q3s, take away sprint qualifying. It's 5 traditional Q3s where he hasn't featured. Hungary, he needs to be in there. He needs to, like Logan Sargent or whoever's contract is up for renewal. You've got this double header and then a month-long summer break where agents and managers can meet and lots of people can vacillate over situations. Well, if Perez has 2 really strong weekends and he takes a lot of that sort of the pressure away. So that's what he needs to be doing.
And Alex, just finally a word on Red Bull and their prospects for this weekend. Back at the legendary Hungaroring, first won by a certain Mr. Piquet. A nice family connection there with Max Verstappen these days. But this year, he's returning as the winner of last year's race. Is there going to be any concern at all from Red Bull, Alex, about their Silverstone pace, showing them maybe not quite as far as ahead of the competition as before? Last year, they were followed home by the 2 Mercedes cars. So what do you think of Red Bull's prospects this weekend? Anything to worry about or got it all in hand?
Oh, I've got it all in hand. Absolutely nothing to worry about. I think, dominant winner in Monaco, well, other than when the rain arrived. But, it's go back to the low speeds stuff and they can cope seemingly just as well there as elsewhere. Also, just on the Silverstone thing, don't forget there was a safety car. He was 9 seconds up the road before the pit stops. So, there's about half the race to go. It wasn't far off the normal advantage. I think there's been a lot made of the small gap to Norris at the end. I think the safety car, you can't read anything into that really. Red Bull certainly looking like the favourite. But just also one quick thing on the Perez situation. Red Bull already knows what happens if its rear gunner isn't up there with its main driver. It happened in 2021. It cost them a world title. And what's happened since then? Dietrich Mateschitz, sadly, is gone. There's new management at the top of Red Bull. They're putting pressure on AlphaTauri to deliver results. The Constructors' Championship victory there comes with a massive financial windfall. Therefore, it's only logical to expect that the team management at Red Bull know that they need to deliver double titles. And if Perez isn't part of that, that's where the pressure's coming from.
Now, once again, Formula One fans will all be turning on the TV this weekend, and a change, once again, to some of the details, the minutiae, if you like, of how we go racing each weekend. Not quite as significant as a sprint weekend, but a change to qualifying. Matt, all the teams will be using hard tyres in Q1, mediums in Q2, softs in Q3, presuming it's not wet. There's a reduction in tyre sets available as well. Will this have any meaningful change on the weekend that you're about to jump on a plane and go and see in person, Matt?
Potentially, but not a lot. So if this topic sounds familiar, we were meant to be sort of introducing the trial for Imola, but obviously that never happened. So here we are a few months down the line. Sort of the public reason is that if you have the allocated tyres for each session, then you can bin off a couple of sets basically, and and that improves F1's sustainability credentials. I don't think a couple of flight cases not travelling, obviously it's a step in the right direction, but I don't think that justifies the change of the format particularly. I think it's more about the very rare occasions where you get like a Williams in Q3, but to get into Q3 they've scrubbed all their softs throughout FP3 and then in the first couple of qualifying sessions. Well, hopefully this should mitigate that so they can still put in a competitive lap, and suddenly you're not left with like an 8-car anti-climax in Q3. But the other thing as well is it will then pay forward into the race, won't it? So that Williams that then hasn't burnt through its set of soft tyres and maybe has got into Q3, it then has another set of soft tyres free, so it can be more aggressive in the race and strategy and sort of go forward a little bit more. But I think for the time being, while it's up in the air or we haven't seen it properly sort of manifest itself on track, that's all there really is to say about it. I think we don't know quite how it's going to transpire, and whether if you were, a relatively new Formula One fan coming in, whether you'll notice a blind bit difference at all, apart from the commentators spending 20 seconds explaining it at the start of Saturday.
Okay, well, we look forward to watching that. And Alex, you mentioned McLaren and some of the reasons why they appeared a bit closer in Silverstone. Let's dig into that a little bit more. McLaren did jump up the pecking order significantly. Mercedes called it a rocket ship. Andrea Stella insists the key has been teamwork and the distributed model for the technical reorganisation back at the factory and in Woking. Now, what do you think about this weekend's performance from McLaren? This track can throw up some unexpected winners. We've seen Button here win here when he wasn't expected to. Seen Heikki Kovalainen, Ocon's won here, all when they weren't really the favourites, to say the least. So, what do we expect from McLaren this weekend? Is it going to be a crazy weekend? Do they think, right, well, we can take the fight, or is it going to be track specific? I guess we don't know till they start putting some lap times in this weekend. But can you expand a little bit more on what we're expecting to see from that upgrade package?
Yeah, interesting. All three of those examples you cited, so Button, Kovalainen and Ocon, required the favourite sort of falling out of the race. Although I think actually, the Hamilton starting at the front from Ocon was the major factor. Mercedes got it wrong on the strategies there in 2021. But McLaren, I think you would expect them logically not to have the Silverstone level performance, simply because that's a super high speed track, which is where they perform very, very well. Lewis Hamilton, very complimentary about how quick the McLaren was in the high speed turns at Silverstone, and there just aren't really any of those at the Hungaroring. There's that turn 4, which is quite rapid at the start of the second sector, I think I'm right in saying. But other than that, it's basically a go-kart track. It's the cliche Monaco without the walls. And unfortunately, McLaren, Lando Norris, very almost disarmingly open in what he said in the press conference after coming second at Silverstone, which is that McLaren is apparently, according to him, still pretty terrible in those conditions. So, much harder challenge for McLaren this weekend. But equally, it is a much better car than it was at the start of the year when they were struggling, Norris hitting the wall in Jeddah, things like that. Also another high speed circuit where it's got walls there, Jeddah, but it does demonstrate just how far McLaren has come. Should probably not Red Bull bothering. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if it did turn out that way, because as Matt said, the opposition is they can't get a handle on which team is going to be second race to race. But I would sort of expect Aston Martin to suddenly start looking pretty good again, particularly with Fernando Alonso, past winner here at the wheel and everything. So harder for McLaren. Not out of the realms of possibility that they won't do well, but I think logically you'd expect it not to go quite so well as Silverstone.
And finally, before we go, Matt, are there any other teams or drivers who I haven't got to yet who you want to give an honourable mention to that you'll be looking out for this weekend when you are trackside for any particular reason?
I can give you a dishonourable mention if you like, Martin. This is something we spoke about on a British Grand Prix podcast and video, and it's just sort of Mercedes. They've been the subject of a lot of attention over the last 18 months, but whether actually now is almost where things look most bleak, because you've had the supposedly game-changing upgrade from Monaco, the abandoning of their sort of cuttlefish ground effects concept to go to a more sort of Red Bull downwash side effect. And lap time comparisons are more difficult, but in terms of results, there's been no sort of obvious uptick. And then you had Spanish Grand Prix, much better performance, but Mercedes were really strong there last year. So that result might need to be reviewed as like another outlier, that that car is mega, or that car concept is mega at Barcelona, not anywhere else. So it's where they go from here, whether it's a case of, and neither are brilliant, but whether it's a case of the upgrades haven't given them a step forward, or whether the upgrades will give them a step forward, but they're now 4 races down the line and they haven't properly correlated them, neither of which are good scenarios to be in. So this is where, Toto Wolff inviting Pep Guardiola into the garage, studying Alex Ferguson's autobiography. This is one of these like where him and Lewis Hamilton need to sort of they carry most weight in that team, and they need to really pull it through and show best possible management, because I don't think there's too much to say that, no, like rot's like a strong word, but I don't think there's been too much to suggest that there's anything to like stop the rot at the minute and get them back to, you know, a ninth constructors title or take the fight to Red Bull.
Well, 8 is great for Lewis Hamilton. He is a pole and win specialist at this venue, but I doubt he'll be doing number 9 of either this venue this weekend after what you've just said. But hey, we don't know what's going to happen till we see the cars on track, and we can't wait to watch Formula One return after a short break. It's a back-to-back, then into the summer break as well. Goodness me. Well, thanks for watching the video today. Remember to check out myself on the Autosport podcast. You can subscribe to that for all of our Formula One coverage and more as well. We'd love to know what you think in the comments below from what our 2 experts have said today, with Alex and Matt giving their thoughts on this weekend. Let's hear yours right now. Leave us a comment, and if you like the video and you like the channel, make sure you give us a thumbs up and subscribe so you always know what's going on at Autosport. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.